this is actually the second workshop we've had targeted at assistant professors. So this is something we're going to do every year annually now. One for an assistant professor, another for associate professors, and we started it last year. So this is our second round. I'm Scott Ballinger. I'm the associate dean for faculty affairs, and I'm here with some other presenters, which I'll present in a moment. So we have two sessions scheduled. So this obviously is session one, and then we have session two next Tuesday on April 11th. These are sequential sessions. So the content we talk about today is not going to necessarily be reintroduced on the second, and the content we have in session two is going to be in different areas. So if possible, please try to attend both. So the goal of session one is to give you give you an overview of the promotion and tenure process and the requirements at the Heersink School of Medicine, and things that you need to be considering when you're organizing your packet. And so that this is organizational, I guess, in content, if you want to think about it. But then in session two, we're going to drill down a bit, and we're going to talk about the different areas of excellence and what is thought of as being evidence of excellence in each of these areas. And then we'll wrap that session up with, I think, 4 summaries of 4 different types of packets that provide examples of the type of thing that is reviewed, to give you an idea of what it's like to have to review some of these packets. At the end of the workshop, Scott's going to be sending out, I guess, the reviews of us. And, please use these for, constructive criticism, accolades if you want. We will be using these and to adjust, the sessions from year to year. So this particular session has been adapted a bit based upon previous comments of the other workshops people have been at. So we really value these. So please feel free to give us your input. Yeah, so the session today is going to be just an overview of the promotion and tenure requirements and what to consider when you're organizing your packet. So you have 4 presenters. I've introduced myself. I'm a professor in the Department of Pathology. We also have Smita Bhatia here. She's a distinguished professor in the Department of Pediatrics. She's currently the vice chair of Faculty Council. She'll be the incoming chair starting this summer. We have Alex Salai as well, who is actually an emeritus professor in the Department of Medicine. And Alex is here because he has years and years of experience being on faculty council and also being heavily involved in the promotion and tenure process in his department. So he's a good resource in that regard. And then we have Scott Austin, who's the executive director of faculty affairs. Scott basically keeps everybody in line and makes sure things happen. He, at the school level, is the person who functions administratively to make sure the packets are organized properly, make sure the council meets when it's supposed to meet, and, as I said, keeps this herd of cats in line. So the way we're going to do the session today, and this is again from past experience, we're going to go through the complete presentation. And if you think of a question during the presentation, please just put it in the chat box. And at the end of the presentation, the entire presentation, we're then going to go through the chat box and we'll address each of your questions. This will enable you, hopefully, to be able to at least sit through the entire presentation. If you have to leave at 1 o'clock or a little bit earlier, that's okay, because this is being recorded and Scott is going to post that on the website and make it available. So you can, sit through and, see the presentation again and see how we answer your question if you weren't able to be there when we got around getting it. If you have burning questions that you want an answer to and you don't want to wait for the recording to get posted, please feel free to email myself, Scott, or Smita, and we can answer your questions in that way as well. So the objectives then is to learn something about this thing called the Faculty Council. And we'll talk about that more on the next slide in the promotion and tenure timeline. the types of reviews that the faculty council does, the basic requirements for promotion for tenure earning and non-tenure earning faculty. I guess present what a portfolio is and how to prepare it and different ways you could prepare it. We'll talk a bit more about packet organization as well and mention some common mistakes that we see. And also in that regard, then give you some tips and best practices. So the faculty council, if you're not familiar with what they are, it's a committee, and it's the principal advisory committee for the dean of the Harris School of Medicine. And the majority of what it does other things, but the majority of what it does is it provides written review and assessment for appointment and promotion and tenure awards for clinical and basic science faculty in the Harris School of Medicine. And it reviews all appointments at the associate professor or professor ranks and awards of tenure. It's composed of 19 members across the School of Medicine. 14 of these positions are elected by the faculty in the School of Medicine. It's basically headed up by a chair and a vice chair, which are elected by its membership. And this is, with approval of the Dean of Medicine. So I'm the current chair. I'm outgoing this summer, and then Smita is going to replace me. And then the vice chair elect is Lynn DeBruns in the Department of Microbiology, and so she'll be the new vice chair. And as I mentioned, Scott Austin is the executive director of faculty affairs, and he is the staff in the dean's office that keeps us in line. So the interaction for this process for the faculty council, it interacts with the dean's office. It also will interact with the departmental APTs, and it can interact with the faculty under certain situations, and I'll mention what that is in a moment. So what you're looking at here is a basic timeline for what we call annual reviews. And so if you're currently a faculty member at UAB, this is probably going to be you. So you'll go through our annual review every year. It really, quite frankly, it starts hopefully a year or two before you actually go up for promotion. And this is going to be in conversations you have with your department chair, presumably at your annual evaluations. And so hopefully this starts a year or two in advance before you actually go up. Once you're actively putting your packet together, though, that's going to start typically in September. And so September through December, you're going to be finalizing the packet, putting together, I guess, recommendations for potential references to your chair, because your chair's office handles that. You can have your colleagues review your packet. Preferably, it's going to be colleagues that have experience and kind of know what, a good packet looks like. In December, typically, your packet will be then turned into the chair's office, which will then review it and then pass it on to your departmental APT committees, typically January or February, and they're going to do the review then. At that point, it then gets moved up to the School of Medicine, and the details on that are in the next slide, but you can see it's really a year-long process for annual reviews. So this is the calendar once it gets to the School of Medicine. So for this year, March 1st was the deadline for submitting the proposals after they had gone through the departmental promotion and tenure process. What happens during mostly the month of March is Scott and his team will go through the packets, and if there's anything that needs to be tightened up or maybe organized in a different fashion, we'll send it back to the department, and the department will revise the proposal. And really, this is to, ensure that your packet is easy to go through and, easy to review, I guess, is what we would say. And so that's what the purpose is of that. And it takes about a month. Right now in April, the council has been assigned all their packets to be reviewed, and they're reviewing the packets. And it's done much like, if you're familiar with the grant review process, it's very similar to that. Every packet is assigned at least 2 reviewers. So you'll have a primary and secondary reviewer. The primary reviewer will be, so if you're a clinical person, the primary reviewer is going to be familiar with, probably a clinical person themselves, are familiar with that. If you're basic science, the other way around. So we try to match the packets with the expertise on the council. We're going to meet 2 evenings, 2 marathon sessions in May, because I think we're going to have about 130 packets to review this year. So we'll meet on May 2nd and 3rd, and the council then discusses and votes the proposal. And again, this is run very similar to a grant study section. The primary and secondary reviewers will lead the review process, and then it's opened up to the rest of the council, and we will discuss the packets, and then they vote on the proposals. Usually the 3rd week of May, letters of notification for both the approvals and disapprovals will be sent to the department chairs, and disapprovals will, the individual faculty member will then be contacted if their packet was disapproved, and reasons will be provided, for the disapproval. And that's usually followed up also by a meeting, one-on-one meeting with the chair of the faculty council to give them a little more, I guess, if you will, granularity about what was going on and why it wasn't approved. At that point, then there's consideration of whether you want to appeal the process. And last year we had changed the appeal process. So previously the appeals were predominantly handled through the chair and the departmental APT chair. We changed it, and now the primary driver of the appeals process is the individual faculty member. Well, initially that might sound kind of intimidating. I think it actually works a lot better, because then the faculty member will meet, with the faculty council chair, and usually the departmental chair and departmental APT chair will also be part of the conversation. And then that enables you to prepare a packet, which, at least personally, I think gives you the best chance for a successful reconsideration. And I think that I've been doing this for many years, and I think this new process works really to the benefit of the individual faculty member. We will meet in June 7th to then review the appeals. And then by usually the 3rd week of June, we submit the recommendations to the dean, who then in July submit the recommendations onto the provost, who then submits them to the president. And then usually by the last week of August, the president's or the provost office will let the dean know the outcome of the promotion and tenure awards. And so it's a long process. So when does it really begin? Well, it really begins actually when you're hired here at UAB. And that's because when the council is reviewing your packets, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at what have you achieved in success and done since you've started at UAB. And then, of course, this is a bit redundant. It's just showing you the different months the process goes. So I've spent most of the time now talking about what we call annual reviews. And that's because I suspect most of the audience, that's what you're going to undergo. It's an annual review. And this is for all current HSO and faculty, and it's for promotions in rank to associate professor or request of award of tenure. And we refer to these as regular cycle reviews. And typically they're reviewed in late April and then voted on in May. We have 2 other types of reviews. We have prior reviews, and this is a review of new hires. So if you're an associate professor or higher and you came here from a different institution and were hired here, that's what you went through initially upon your hire. And it's very similar to the annual review. You have to put a packet together. You have to have all the same components in that packet. It's just handled electronically, and the council actually does not meet completely together in one shot. It's everyone reviews the packets and then votes on them. I guess if you want to think about it in a remote fashion. These are all hires at associate professor level or higher, or involving the award of tenure. And we refer to these as out of cycle, because it occurs throughout the year. The other area is retention packages. And so if you're considering employment elsewhere and part of your retention package is a promotion in rank or award of tenure, that component of it also goes through the faculty council. Again, same types of components, it's just handled electronically. So I'm going to go over this very quickly because I suspect most of the audience is familiar with it. But you have different faculty tracks. You have non-tenure earning faculty, and these are faculty that are typically appointed for periods of 1 to 5 years, and these appointments can be renewed. So they're not on what we call a tenure track. We have tenure earning faculty, which are referred to as being on a tenure track, and at the HSOM, they have 10 years. I guess, if you will, a probationary period or earn tenure. Now, a little nuance of this is your period begins on October 1 after your appointment. And that's how it's looked at. So, for example, I was hired in June when I came here 1,000 years ago. Okay. My actual tenure earning period did not begin until the following October. So that's something to think a little bit about when you're trying to make judgments. So, for example, let's say you were hired in December. Well, your tenure clock actually didn't begin until the following October. So that's just a little nuance that I think many people are not aware of. And then, of course, you have tenured faculty. That's what you think. They've tenure, and this is a commitment by the Board of Trustees of right of continuing employment, except for certain conditions. Again, I'll go over this quickly. I think most of you probably know what the ranks are. You have as instructor, assistant professor, associate, and full professor. Instructors are only non-tenure earning tracks. Assistant professor and the remainder can be non-tenure earning or tenure earning. And they have different requirements. So assistant professor typically will see a 2 to 3 years experience after receiving their terminal degree, in this case, doctorate. Associate professor, currently a minimum of 3 or more years at the rank of assistant professor, and for professor, a minimum of 3 or more years at the rank of associate professor. As you can see, these are asterisks in red, and that's because beginning in July of 2023, pending the provost office approval, which it hasn't been approved yet, but if it is approved, this time it's going to change to a minimum of 5 or more years. If you are currently a faculty member at UAB and you're sitting in on this and listening, you don't need to panic because you will be grandfathered. So current faculty are grandfathered, and the requirement is going to be 3 years. So this is just a requirement that's going to be for new hires. And it's based on the fact that this is what our peer institutions are doing, quite frankly. Okay, when I have questions, this is really more of a reminder for me to turn it over to the next presenter. Please, if you have questions, just indicate them in the chat box. And at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Alex.
Yeah, put them in the chat box, or we'll come back to them at the end of the presentation. All right. So what are the requirements for promotion and or tenure? And at UAB, as typical of most academic institutes, there's 3 pillars of excellence: research, teaching, and service. Tenure earning faculty are required to provide or expected to provide evidence of excellence in 2 of these 3 areas. Now, that's the expectation. You can, of course, you can be excellent in all 3 areas, and that's what we like to see. But the requirements for tenure earning faculty for promotion and tenure are 2 areas of excellence. I'll come back to this later, but promotion and tenure are 2 different things. They're 2 different entities. So they're voted on separately. And you as an applicant can request promotion and tenure at the same time, or you can request promotion during one cycle and defer the request for tenure at a subsequent cycle. So they're not directly linked. And they at faculty council, if somebody does ask for promotion and tenure, they are discussed separately. The question of promotion is discussed at length and voted on, followed by a discussion about tenure, and that is voted on. So they're 2 separate things. And there are many instances where one of the 2 is approved and one of the 2 is not. So just so you know that. Non-tenure earning faculty comparison are required to provide evidence of excellence in only one of the three areas. So those are minimum requirements. Tenure, as Scott said, tenure earning period here is a maximum of 10 years. It begins October 1. Scott had already discussed that. Tenure may be conferred only upon appointees holding the rank of associate professor or professor. So there are no assistant professors with tenure. I already discussed that they're voted on separately from promotion and that they can be made at the same time or at separate points in time in your career. In bold here and underlined, if tenure has not been awarded by the 9th year after your appointment on October 1st, the appointment for the final year shall be a terminal appointment. And to qualify for consideration for tenure during the terminal year, you must have been considered for tenure prior to the terminal year. If tenure cannot be attained by that terminal year, you have two options. You can either leave UAB, or what the majority of people do is switch to the non-tenure earning track. So you could switch from tenure earning to non-tenure earning. You could do that switch once. You can't jump back and forth. Again, something to think about. And just a reminder, we'll come back to the questions in the chat box. Scholarly activity versus scholarship. This is literally and figuratively semantics. So I give some examples here. We look for scholarship and we look for scholarly activity, and whether one or both are sustained when we look at promotion and tenure. So an example, delivering a good lecture in a medical school or graduate level class is an example of a scholarly activity. And we're at an academic institute of higher learning. That's expected that you participate in scholarly activity. Developing and validating a curriculum, a course, or a new approach to teaching is an example of scholarship. It's above and beyond. It's more than is typical. And that's what we look for. We ask, are you involved in scholarly activity, the three pillars? And really the scholarship is, are you excellent at it? Or do you show evidence of excellence in those activities? I gave another example here. A distinction may be made between a faculty member who provides competent clinical service versus one who is viewed as a recognized authority in an area of clinical medicine. A competent surgeon versus one who has developed a new technique, for example. So this can apply to any person, regardless of your phenotype. So the first promotion packet that you will submit will be one when you're asking to be promoted from assistant professor to associate professor. And again, we look for distinguished performance as an assistant professor, at least 3 to 5 years in rank. And just a reminder, this asterisk, we already talked about it, that it's being considered by the provost's office to extend this to 5 or more years. I would say that that the majority, we don't have the numbers, but we talked about it just the other day, that the majority of people who apply for promotion do so about 4 or 5 years, 6 years into their rank. There are a few that apply earlier. The success rates are improved the longer you are in rank. And that makes sense because you'd have time to accrue excellence or evidence of excellence. So don't see that extension of the timeline as punitive. It isn't. In fact, it will increase the probability of a successful package. Think of it positively. So we look for academic credentials and the demonstration of specialized accomplishments appropriate to our HSOM. It's good to be a good citizen, to be involved in leadership as a member of the department. Keep that in mind. Demonstration of national or internationally recognized excellence in the conduct of your duties, and evidence of scholarship and productivity, of course, in the areas of research, teaching, or service. And just a reminder, tenure earning You need to show evidence of excellence in 2 of the 3 areas, non-tenure earning in only 1 area of excellence. And that really is a very important decision to make early on and to think about. Common problems, we could give a long seminar on common problems, but things that we typically see, the timing is off. And we talked about that people in their haste might be applying for promotion or tenure too early, too soon. That there really isn't enough evidence to judge whether your excellence is sustained, for example. 1 or 2 good years sometimes is not sufficient to have the council, and remember it's a council, there's 19 separate votes and majority rules. So sometimes it's better to just delay, maybe wait another year. So these are all things that should be discussed early on in the process with your chairman and others. In terms of areas of excellence, again, you have to think about this. There's inconsistency sometimes between the area of excellence that's defined in the packet. For example, service and research might be the areas that we are told to judge. But when we look at the packet, there's stronger evidence, perhaps, for teaching. So, you know, that too, that's really one of the reasons we have this workshop. We want the candidates, you, to be aware that packaging your packet is really important. It has to be consistent. We are obligated to critique the packet based on the areas of excellence that we are told that we should critique. And we do see quite often every year packets that would have done great had they thought a little bit more about the area of excellence that they chose to be judged on. I would add too that that's what your faculty counselors are for. They can be consulted at any time prior to your packet going in, so feel free to do that. Lack of adequate documentation in your CV for the strengths in the area being claimed, related to the earlier one, that if you propose in your packet to be judged on your research, we need to see documented evidence of your excellence in your CV. It has to be supported. And one that we see quite often, the lack of evidence for national or international recognition. When you're early in your career, is the time to think about it, to become known elsewhere, I guess is the best way to do it. And there are many ways to achieve that. And we'll go into that into more detail in subsequent or in the next session, and probably will be mentioned later on in this seminar. Again, that's the pause. I think we have a transition now to Smita.
Hello, everyone. So what I'm going to be talking about is your portfolios, how to create them, and what constitutes summaries of excellence. So each area of excellence, whether it be teaching, service, or research, should have a portfolio, and all 3 areas should be addressed. You're allowed about 2 pages per area of excellence, don't exceed that. The portfolios are important because they allow you to highlight and explain your successes, so you can pick out and really expand on your successes that you've pointed out in your CV. And the faculty council members use the portfolios to find out what achievements the candidate believes are the most important and are relevant for their promotion or tenure. Faculty council members or the reviewers may be from different departments. For example, while ideally we like to match them, it might be that you're a clinician educator and you get a basic scientist for your reviewer. So this is your opportunity to educate the reviewers. The important thing to note, and Scott Ballinger said this again and again, create and maintain your portfolios for each area of excellence and update them in real time. These are your responsibilities, and make sure that you're not scrambling at the 11th hour. So, suggestions for portfolios. Review the appointment, promotion, and tenure award guidelines. You'll do that tonight as your homework. Explicitly highlight ways you think you have met those guidelines without repeating exactly what you read. So don't copy and paste from your CV. Pick the most important successes and provide details around them, flesh them up a bit. CVs are quite often extensive, and reviewers can miss the important things when they're reading lists upon lists of all that you've achieved. Very often in the CV, you're not able to highlight your national recognition, and this is an opportunity to do so in your portfolio. So explain your awards, your recognitions, or the foundational grants might have gotten, because the faculty council reviewer may not be in your discipline and may not understand the significance of all these awards and recognitions that you received. All right, how do you organize them? So the organization can be done in many, many ways. You can do it by level. So you start from the smallest to the largest levels, for example, from the division going to the department, the school, the university, the region, and then the national, or even the international level. Or you can go by project from your own research, which is your R1, then those where you're a significant collaborator or co-investigator in other people's projects, or where you're playing a bigger role as a team scientist. Or you could do it by theme. For example, you have a portfolio of various themes. You could be your bench science, it could be the outreach that you're performing, or the university service that you're performing. You can also do it by chronological order. So you could do it, say, in 1920, I did this. Sorry, 1920, we weren't there then. 2020, I did this. 2021, I did this. But that's not probably the best strategy, because you're often repeating yourself and you're confusing the poor reviewer, and never do you want to confuse the reviewer. You must have a portfolio in the area that is not your area of excellence. So for example, if research and service are your stated areas of excellence, you need to give some like a paragraph or more devoted to teaching as well. It can be short, but you need to show activity in all three. And then of course the formatting. You can format it in the form of bullets, or you can create a narrative in the form of a paragraph. So here's an example of a bullet. So this is a teaching portfolio, and this person has organized it by the units in the academic organization. So School of Medicine, this person says, I've been teaching at the UAB medical students, rotating through such and such ambulatory clinics and inpatient consult service for 8 years. Then I conduct such and such lectures in the module for medical students. I've been appointed faculty judge for the medical student research day, and I have written recommendation letters for medical students. So it's all taking care of the medical students in terms of the teaching activities. At the level of the department, it's similar activities, but it's focused on internal medicine residents, rotating through outpatient clinics or the Cooper Green Clinic, and so on and so forth. And then you come to your fellowship program, and here this is at the level of the division. Here you talk about how you supervise the fellows that rotate through the outpatient, inpatient services, and then you have conducted annual board reviews for the fellows, that you've conducted annual fellowship core conferences, and you've organized and moderated the monthly multidisciplinary survivorship clinics. And then you have mentored various fellows and faculties in their careers. And then you have reviewed posters for faculty and fellows prior to submissions. So essentially what it's saying is how from the School of Medicine down to the division level, you've really focused on teaching each of those levels of individuals, and it's nicely highlighted in the form of these bullets. Other programs, you can talk about how you've also mentored pathology and ENT fellows, and so you're stepping out of your own internal medicine specialty, and then you are teaching and supervising endocrine fellows and surgery and ENT fellows through multidisciplinary clinics. And then at institutional level, you've given grand rounds and taught so-and-so. So these are the bullets for teaching. So what are the strengths? That it's very easy to organize by the institutional level in this example. It's easy to follow, and you're able to include different parts of your teaching very quickly and succinctly. What are the weaknesses? Maybe it might become more than 2 pages, but you can easily fit it in 2 pages. There is this slight danger that you might be repeating the CV because it's similar to a CV format in terms of what you've written. And sometimes it can appear repetitive because you're organizing it in the same way, saying the same thing, but at different levels for different groups of people. The paragraph example actually is like this. So you say that I have been very active in medical education. And here you have taught students and residents and fellows and faculty. So you've combined it all in one sentence. And you have done this through formal presentations at grand rounds and fellow and resident teaching, learning conferences. You teach in the clinic. You have an NP student who's rotating and you've taught that NP. And then you've taught students, research assistants, and physicians shadowing you in the clinic. So essentially in a paragraph, you've combined what you would put in 3 different sections. Then you have your activities in the lay community about teaching performed in several groups, and then talked about secondary prevention in those community settings and nutrition as well. And then since 2018, you have been directing such and such group for the fellows, and this involves maybe monthly informal discussions or teaching in the students, or for fellows who are rotating through a certain discipline, and you were planning on doing that, but COVID held you back during that year. So this is in the form of a paragraph. You've got all the activities down in a paragraph or 2 or 3. And so what are the critiques of a paragraph example? The strength side, it's a narrative, so it's easier to read. It gives you a nice quick summary of all your teaching. It's organized by the audience, and then it's usually less than 1 page because you're not repeating it as many times as you were in the bullet version. And then the weaknesses are it can feel disjointed, but you can overcome that if you really write a polished version, which is organized by the audience that you're teaching to or addressing. So when you're creating your portfolios, you should definitely reach out to others for help. It should not be an afterthought. You should invest time and effort on your portfolios. You should enlist mentors for help. You should ask your peers to review it, and don't ever copy your CV because your CV is already there in the packet. You don't want it to be yet another copy of your CV. Use this in order to embellish and enhance the activities that you really think reflect the areas of excellence. Now, letters of support. So you need both internal and external reference letters. You need 3 to 5 internal letters and 3 to 5 external letters. Important to remember, these external letters are not from people within UAB and not from Birmingham VA. So that doesn't constitute an external organization. Department chairs are responsible for actually formally requesting those letters, but you can assist the chairs by providing suggestions for who should write those letters. Important to remember that the rank should be at a promotion level requested or higher. So if you're going up for promotion to associate professor, the person who's writing the letter should be an associate or a full professor, should not be an assistant professor. And they should all be having an academic background. It can't be from people such as students or patients or community members, because those can be part of a testimonial, but they can't constitute letters of reference. Now, even though chairs are technically responsible, you want to stay on top of your own letters. You need to be your own advocate. So make friends with the administrators for the chairs and keep them really sort of nudging them along, and start early. It's never too late to start early. So for internal letters, you can get letters from the UABE or from Birmingham VA Again, the important thing is to make sure that the rank should be at the level of promotion requested or higher. And it's best not to get all of your letters from your own division, because if you get letters from other divisions or other departments, you're showing collegiality and the fact that you are engaging in service outside of your division. In terms of external letters, it should not, so here's the philosophy of arm's length. It should not be a current collaborator. It should not be a former heavy collaborator. It should not be a former mentor or advisor. And ideally, the chair will be asking someone from another institution who does not know you personally. So who uses your CV to really glean, and your portfolio, to glean what would constitute as areas of excellence and whether you are appropriate in terms of being ready for promotion or tenure. Okay, this is how you can help your letter writers. You give them advance notice that your chair may be contacting them. Provide them with your up-to-date CV and your portfolios and your areas of excellence, and specifically ask them to include in the area your desired rank or tenure, for example, associate professor non-tenure earning or associate professor tenure earning, and then your areas of excellence, service or teaching or research. So there are often problems that happen, right, with your portfolio and letter of or recommendation. What issues arise with the portfolio summary does not explain or detail evidence for excellence. Portfolio summary exceeds the 2-page limit, or it includes too much information, such as PowerPoint presentations or publications or individual student evaluations. You don't want to do that. You want to make it as succinct as possible, and yet it should be to the point where it highlights your areas of excellence. And then the letters of recommendation. What is very sad, and we see it, what happens is that there's inconsistency between the emphasis of letter and the areas of excellence that you are trying to claim, or the areas of excellence are not even stated in the letter. The academic rank of the letter writer is not clear, or the writer's rank is not at or above the person going up for promotion, and the letters are from non-academic institutions or private practices. Sometimes it happens that the external letters are not really external because they're from former mentors or your colleagues who are actually your friends. And you really do want to show that there is distance and objectivity, and increasingly there's a huge amount of emphasis being placed on this. External letters should not come from the Birmingham BA, as we discussed. The external letters cannot be from faculty who were recently appointed at UAB, should have been out of UAB for at least 5 years. External letters are all regional, so if they're all coming from the Southeast, that wouldn't be so good. They have not established that the letters of support are from colleagues in the field and not mentors or current collaborators. And you can have too many letters. You don't want that. There is a minimum and there's a maximum. You should stick to that. And then I would pass it on to others. We see a lot of questions coming up and want to make sure that we keep time for those.
Right. We're going to shift focus now a little bit and focus a little bit more on the overall organization of the packet and several key components. So when you start preparing your promotion packet, the first thing you really should do is get a copy of the promotion and tenure instructions and really carefully review the instructions. The instructions change just slightly from year to year. Typically, the changes are really based on annual guidance from the provost office. And we definitely start the process. We kick off the process each year by sharing the most up-to-date version of the instructions with the department chair, the department APT chair, the department rep, and it's also posted on our faculty resources page. And we'll go over some of the other resources that are available here in another slide in just a few minutes. The various components that make up a packet are very clear in the instructions, so I really won't cover this at I'll just really touch on this at a high level for this presentation and give you something that you can refer back to in the PowerPoint and in the recording of this video. But I will say that it's important to understand that the assembling and submission of your promotion packet is really a joint effort involving both the promotion candidate and a representative from your chair's office. Typically, we refer to the person as an administrative rep or a department rep that's identified to help all of the faculty within the department with the submission process. Here, if you look, the common components reflected in black text in this slide are typically added to your packet by the department representative or a representative from the chair's office, and the items in red text are the ones that are the responsibility of the person being promoted. So you can refer back to this, but we mainly want you to know that it's a joint effort, and there's certain components that you have ownership of, and there's certain components that you're dependent on your department rep within your specific department to help you with. Regarding your CV, this is really an important part of the packet, and it's a part that is often neglected in some cases in the promotion packet. So we strongly recommend that you go ahead and start creating your CV early, and that you start keeping track of that CV in the proper SOM format, and that you update it regularly. This will really help you when it comes time to really start focusing on putting together your promotion packet. You don't really have to kind of take a step back and start trying to add a lot of things to your CV kind of last minute. If you have an administrative assistant or someone in your department that is helping you with this conversion process, or who is, kind of at the last minute converting your CV to the proper SOM format, be sure that be sure to really take a careful look at it and review it to make sure the final CV is accurate and that they didn't miss anything. A lot of times when we see errors in the CV, it's from this process where it's been delegated out and there's been cut and paste errors, and maybe we're missing like actually entire years of documentation from a CV, and so it can create problems. So just be sure to take ownership of that and make sure that the final CV is that you review it and that it's accurate. It's important to make sure that the CV formatting follows the guidelines. For example, here on this slide, you can see the educational, postdoctoral training, and academic appointment starting with year, degree, and then the type of appointment: degree, training, academic positions, and then listing the institutions. You want to follow this format. You typically see these sections entered into the CV in reverse chronological order. So you have your most recent first, and then kind of work backwards from there. Then you kind of move into your work, such as publications, presentations, and other works. These should be listed in chronological order. When listing things like authorship, be sure to underline and highlight your name so it's easy to spot. So it's really just looking at the CV template and being sure to follow that. Be sure to include all important details. For example, for grant support, it's important to include the amount of funding, to list the PI. If your role on the grant is something other than the PI, then you'll want to note that. And then you can even specify the impact of your role, for current awards. Lastly, we recommend that you maintain your CV and you update it regularly. So this really should start kind of from the beginning when you're hired. Go ahead and build your CV in the SOM format and add to it regularly, and that'll really help you along with the process. For reprints, I want to focus a little bit of time on reprints. In prior sessions, we commonly get the question, what is meant by a reprint? So I just wanted to go ahead and address that. So the term reprint really dates back to a time prior to email and internet. Back then, faculty had to type and submit hard copies of papers to prospective publishers. If a paper was accepted by a publisher, faculty oftentimes had to order reprints. And so that's where this term comes from. But a good rule of thumb when you're adding reprints or publications to your packet, a good rule of thumb is that it's something that was peer reviewed and was published. So examples include articles, reviews, case reports, manuscripts, or even book chapters. And so these are typically the types of things that we're looking for in your reprints or publication section. It's also important to know that reprints are always required if research is one of your areas of excellence. If research is not one of your areas of excellence, we still strongly recommend submitting reprints if you have published work that you can include. So if you have listed manuscripts or publications on your CV, and research is not an area of excellence, I would definitely include those in your reprint section. It definitely stands out if they're not there, but obviously you can't submit if you haven't published any work. When including reprints, do not include more than the required or requested number. We ask for 3 reprints for promotion to associate professor. So if you submit more than 3, we'll oftentimes return the packet and request that you narrow it down to the 3 that you consider to be the highest impact, and leave it at that. Lastly, we want to make sure that your reprints are of good quality and are easy to read for the reviewers. We've pointed out that we have typically between 100 and 130 packets to review, and it's definitely frustrating to the reviewers if you have poor quality scans or bad copies that are scanned and inserted into a packet. So just make sure not only your reprints, but really everything in your packet is clear, legible, and easy for the reviewers to read. All right, and we'll touch on a couple of common problems. You really can avoid some common problems by reviewing the instructions, which we've alluded to a couple of times, and really using the instructions to check the organization of your packet, to check the formatting of your CV, and to make sure that documents are clear and easy to read. Regarding portfolios, be sure that each portfolio includes key elements that demonstrate achievements in the area. Here, I like to emphasize that it's important to focus on quality of information versus quantity. A lot of times you will see kind of people throw everything at the reviewers, and sometimes that makes it a little bit more difficult to pick out the key components that they're really looking for. So be sure to really brag on yourself in your portfolios. Use the 2-page summary limit to really emphasize the things that you've done to demonstrate excellence or achievements in that area. But be careful not to overdo it. With the attachments and the different addendums that you include in that section, showing supporting documentation. Avoid copying and pasting. You've heard us say that 2 or 3 times during this presentation. We say that because you wouldn't believe the number of packets where it's just simply copying and pasting from their CV in each portfolio. So we're emphasizing this for a reason. That is not the best use of your portfolio. Really avoid the temptation of just copying and pasting. This is your chance to really kind of expand and add more detail than what's provided in your CV. Like just as an example, if you are not the PI on a grant and maybe it's a really large award, your research portfolios where you can really discuss the impact of your impact on that award, or the dollars generated by your role on that award. So it's really just an area for you to kind of really go in more detail in your portfolio than possibly you would in certain areas of your CV. Be sure to include a portfolio for each area. You heard Dr. Badia mention this as well. Even if it's not one of your areas of excellence, you should demonstrate what you've done in that area. That's going to be very useful. It will stand out if you do not include a portfolio for each section: teaching, research, and service. It doesn't have to be 2 pages. It doesn't have to be long, but you should highlight what you've done in those areas. And in some areas, there's even a little bit of crossovers. For example, teaching and service. Some things that you do in each of those areas could actually go in both portfolios. And so just be sure to list what you've accomplished in each area, and be sure to include that in your portfolios. One more time, and avoid including unnecessary information, such as additional copies of publications, PowerPoint presentations of lectures, a lot of individual student evaluations. The provost office actually requests that all evaluation or course evaluations be kind of course level summary evaluations, and not individual student evaluations by hundreds of students that have participated in your classes. So just avoid unnecessary details and just follow the instructions. It's really laid out pretty nicely for you, and it's pretty easy to follow as well. So just be careful not to be careful to not include unnecessary information in these portfolios. And then the last bullet really is regarding independence, is more for the chair and the ATPC letter. So this is really more for the chair's office, but you can also help address this by showing in your portfolio, demonstrating that you've achieved independence, particularly in your research portfolio. So even though this is something that's really more focused toward the chair's office, you can also be sure to document independence in your portfolio. So that's part of really just kind of taking ownership of your packet. And then quickly, I just wanted to include a slide to really point you to some of the resources that are available. You mainly so you could refer back to this as needed, but here we provide a link to the faculty resources website, and there are a number of things on this website, from recordings such as this presentation, recordings for other promotion and tenure workshops, also instructions and guidelines from the provost, and then the overall promotion and tenure award instructions are all available on our faculty resources website, which is accessible either through this link or using the QR code that you see here in this slide. And then lastly, here on this slide, there are some reference to sections of the UAB faculty handbook related to promotion and tenure, and there's also some best practices for promotion and tenure included in the faculty handbook. So here you can see the specific sections and link to those sections if you would like to kind of review some more in more detail. And then lastly, just a couple of tips for building your packet. In closing here, I really want to just state, start on your CV and your portfolios early. Update your scholarly activities in real time. This is really key to building a strong CV and strong portfolios. Ideally, your portfolios should be built over several years. So it's important to start early and then incorporate changes in these portfolios as needed. Lastly, we always like to emphasize that to take direct responsibility for the components of your packet that you control. It's your promotion, so you don't want to rely on others to build your CV and key components of your packet. You'll hear us say several times throughout this presentation and the next one, it's your promotion. So be sure to take ownership of that process and really make sure that you spend the adequate time to document what you've done in each one of the areas, particularly your areas of excellence. And I think with that, that's the end of our presentation, and we can kind of go back through now and start addressing some of the questions that came up during the presentation.
All right. Thanks, Scott. So let's just go through the questions. I think the first question is about the time requirement at rank. And so the question is, time requirement in previous rank by 3 or more years. Is the entirety of that time in rank required at UAB? The answer to that is no. So for example, if you were an assistant professor at another institution for 1 year, and then you were recruited to UAB, and so technically after 2 years, you would have been at the assistant professor rank for 3 years. So that would make you eligible to submit your packet. And again, this harkens back, I think, to the discussion that Alex brought up is, there's a question of eligibility. And so the answer is yes, you'd be eligible. But then there's the more important question of probability of success. And you really have to consider that, because you have to show sustained excellence in your chosen areas. And in the majority of cases, it takes longer than 3 years at rank to do that. So it's just a call that you and your I think departmental chair are going to have to make. But hopefully that explains that question.
Scott, can I follow up on that a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, and this will apply to the next session. But now, when it comes to being promoted to the next rank, remember, we're going to ask the question as faculty counselors, what have you done since your previous promotion? Right. Because you're asking for promotion, right? So there's a logical starting point for us to gauge your progress. And so if you're going from associate to professor, for example, we want to know, what have you done really since you were promoted to associate? That's the window that we're looking at. I just want to point that out. It's kind of related.
Yeah. Another question is regards to switching between tracks. So I think the question they're asking here is, what about a situation that if you were non-tenure earning and then you switched to tenure earning and then later decided you wanted to switch back to non-tenure earning? Presumably, I think in this context is what they're arguing is, what if it doesn't look like you're going to get award of tenure? Can you switch back to non-tenure earning? Scott Austin, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take this. First of all, let me kind of emphasize that switching from non-tenure track to tenure track it's not an easy request. It actually is. There are some requirements that have to have occurred during the recruitment that for this to even be allowable from the start. Otherwise, it would have to be a full recruitment, and you would basically be, rehired or a new hire. However, if someone is hired non-tenure track and their role is expanded or changes over the first several years of their employment, and they do get approved by the school and the provost office to move to tenure earning track, they do still have that option to move back to non-tenure track at the end of the tenure earning period if tenure is not achieved. So basically the options presented in the presentation are the options that are available. You just couldn't move from tenure track to non-tenure track and then request a move back to tenure track without it basically being a break in service and there being a new hire process.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is, what about work done at another university prior to UAB? Alex, you want to take that one?
Yeah, if it's work in quotations as a faculty member at a certain rank, then absolutely, it's something that we will look at. We provide promotions and tenure at UAB, so the question of citizenship is always important. But yes, you're a faculty member at an institute of higher learning. Sometimes we will consider what stature that previous institute has, because there are different ones, but absolutely, your time in rank counts, whether it's at UAB or elsewhere.
Yeah, the only caveat I think I would add to that is if you did a lot of things at your prior institution, and say one of the areas was excellence, was teaching, and you developed a lot of courses at your previous institution, you developed curriculum there, and then you came to UAB and you still wanted to maintain in the area of excellence of teaching, but then you basically just gave spot lectures, you didn't develop any curriculum at UAB, that's not going to be looked at favorably. So they're going to expect to see, sustained productivity once you get to UAB. So maybe you were a superstar at your previous institution, and then you came here, and for whatever reasons, maybe weren't as productive. It's going to be looked at through that lens. So that's just, you need to be cognizant of that. The next question is, do you have to show proof of all this work, copies of email invitations, presentations, etc., activities? Smita, you want to take that?
Yeah, actually, so really you don't want to be showing every little minute detail of all the things that you are doing. You already are going to be turning in some of your papers that you have published, and if they're testimonials, you will turn those in. But email invitations to each talk that you gave, I don't think that is necessary, unless Scott Austin disagrees with me.
I don't disagree. I think that you can include things like that in your portfolio. Oftentimes we refer to the portfolio as a 2-page limit, but that's really referring to your summary, which is the write-up that you prepare and submit. We will oftentimes see pages of testimonials or thank you letters from patients or thank you letters from students. Maybe a copy of an award certificate for like a Dean's Excellence Award or a President's Award. Those are the types of things we typically see. If you were invited to give an international lecture or to do something that's really high level, you could definitely include that invitation. Like Dr. Badia is saying, you don't have to include something documenting every single, lecture that you were invited to give, or every talk or presentation at a conference that you were invited to give, but definitely the ones that are, you're most proud of, or you think are really significant accomplishments, include them.
Okay. The next question is, so prior training program faculty are automatically excluded as external letter writers. Alex, you want to take that?
It's a tricky one to answer because I'm trying to decipher the context of the question.
Me too.
I think I could take it, and then y'all can definitely
Okay.
disagree with me.
Go ahead.
So in our guidelines, in the instructions, we specifically added 2 or 3 pages of providing guidance for external reviewers. And in that guidance, we've tried to give some framework, but also leave a little bit of flexibility. And so what we really did was added kind of timelines. So depending on the rank, so someone going up from assistant to associate professor, I think we basically said that there needs to be kind of a 5 or more years break in that service. Since so for example, if 10 years ago you received your doctoral degree and your mentor is providing an external letter, that's possible. But I would also say that it wouldn't be great if every external letter come from a previous mentor or supervisor. So you kind of have to, give or take a little bit with that, I guess, is the way I would describe it.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is there a way to see which UAB faculty are tenured? I can actually let Scott Austin address that. Then there's a follow-up to that. Are there pros and cons in asking the same letter writers for tenure, internal or external letter writers for tenure applications that you are also asked for applications for promotion? I'll let Alex Salai answer that one. So
Yeah,
Scott,
the letter that actually takes care of itself, because if I, for example, if Scott Ballinger was asking for promotion to professor with the award of tenure, and I was asked to write a letter, I would specifically be requested to address both issues. So in that single letter, it would end with, I strongly support Dr. Ballinger's promotion to professor, and I strongly support the award of tenure.
Alex, this is where if they're decoupled temporally.
Yes, but as a letter writer,
yeah,
I would indicate in my letter. I think that's what the question is. Can you ask the same person? So yes, I would address both concerns in a single letter.
Yeah.
Faculty council would vote on both issues separately.
No. So if this particular candidate was already promoted to become an associate professor, and 2 years down the road is going in for an award of tenure and is saying, can she ask for the same letter writer to write another letter?
Again, Scott Ballinger and Scott Austin, I think that would be fine.
Yeah, that is. I mean, we've never. So really, kind of addressing both of these questions. One, there is no way for me to provide a list to all faculty of who's tenured and non-tenured, or who's tenure earning versus tenure. Departments have that. There's some reporting features in our HR system that we can use. We focus a lot more on rank than on tenure status when it comes to looking at internal letters. And external letters as well, because some institutions don't even offer tenure, and so that's not a big area of emphasis. We do focus on making sure that people are of the proper academic rank. So that kind of addresses the first part. The second part is we really don't look back from promotion packet 1 year to the next to see, so we really wouldn't have a clue that the same people are providing letters from your previous promotion. I mean, they would obviously be new letters that are addressing the award of tenure in a later cycle, but there's no problem with asking the same reviewers, and we would really have no idea that happened. We can barely review the packets for this year with there being 130. We really don't have the capacity to go back and look at prior packets.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, if you don't know the tenure status of your letter, right, you can ask, right? And usually in the letters that we receive from external and internal, the writer indicates what their rank is and also whether they have tenure status. The next question is about HSOM CV format, where can it be found? And we've trained you all well because someone already answered the question. They submitted a link in the chat box. The next question is there a best practice for bioarchives paper? Basically, then when those have been officially been published, so these are like preprints. I think what I would suggest that you do is you have a section in your bibliography that you list as preprints, and then as those get published in a peer-reviewed process, you can then switch them to your, peer-reviewed manuscript section. That's how I would choose to handle that. Any comments on that, Alex?
Yeah, I think it needs to be made clear.
Yeah.
That it's really what we want to look at is peer review.
Peer review.
And the outcome of a peer review.
Right.
We do understand that, like everything else, academia is changing.
Mm-hmm.
But we will look, and we do discuss at length when we see it, publications from BioRx, because
okay.
It's a posted manuscript, but if it hasn't been peer reviewed, it won't carry the day.
Right. Samantha, you want to take the next question? It's when the timeline for tenure is closing in, is it advisable to apply for promotion in the following year for tenure, or would that not be enough time to assess trajectory?
What a tricky question, right?
I give it to you.
Well, the option is not there. You do have to, if the timeline is closing in, it is important to apply for tenure. And you will have to factor in that you have provided enough of a sustained productivity for us to be able to assess the trajectory. Yeah.
I think the thing I would have to add is if you go up for promotion one year and then you're going up tenure the very next year, you're going to have to be able to clearly show in your packet that something, major has really changed to bring you up to that bar, so to speak. But Alex, do you have any comments since you're the philosopher of the bunch here?
Yes, as a philosopher, I always have comments.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you, this is where it comes down to a very personal decision by the applicant. And we can only advise. We know what the statistics are because we see them. There are various reasons people choose to ask for promotion and tenure at the same time. And there are a myriad of reasons that people might choose to uncouple them, apply for promotion one cycle and tenure the next. I think personally, as a single counselor, when I was on faculty council, I like to see people asking for both. Because if they're good enough for tenure, I think they're good enough for promotion.
Right.
Really similar criteria. The key is, I've always said that I look at tenure as promotion is what have you done? Tenure is what are the chances you're going to keep doing? So tenure is kinetics of your trajectory. But I'm one reviewer, and remember, I underscore the fact that it's a council, and not everybody. We discussed this at length.
Right.
Well, and I think one thing that may impact that strategy would be where you are in your tenure earning period versus where you are at time at rank. So, it is possible that, you're at the associate professor level, but only been sitting there for 3 or 4 years, but you're in your 9th year for tenure earning period. So in that case, it may be optimal to go up for award of tenure 1 year and then promotion within a year or two after, following.
Yeah.
But the key word there, Scott, was strategy.
Right.
It comes down to the individual case. Sure.
Right. And I think there was another question above about the best time to go from non-tenure earning to tenure earning. I can address this. The main thing that I can tell you is, one, there is a important piece of criteria in the UAB faculty handbook that must occur for this to even be an option. And that is that the original recruitment to the position must have been open rank or tenure earning. So if you were hired to a non-tenure earning position, then it's not even an option to request a change from non-tenure earning to tenure earning. So, but if that criteria was met, then it is an option to request the change. My experience is based on the reviewers that are currently in place. So this goes to the school, to Faculty Affairs Provost Office, and to the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the institution level for review. And it's pretty carefully vetted. So you need a solid justification for the change. And the more time that elapses from the time of hire the more time that passes, the harder it is to get that change approved. So I would say that earlier in your career is the best. If it appears that you are, if your roles and responsibilities better align with a tenure earning track than a non-tenure earning track, I would say that needs to happen pretty early on, within the first few years of appointment. You don't want to advance in rank a couple of times and then request a move from non-tenure earning to tenure earning.
So, yeah, I think, Scott, just to sum up the answer, there's two different moving parts here. One is, what's the nature of your current position? Were you recruited as what they call an open position, or was it specifically for a non-tenure earning? You got to answer that question first, because then the path you'll take will be different based upon what that is. And then the second question is, well, now you're talking about you're being looked at for two areas of excellence. And so that's what Scott was trying to address. It's going to be up to, if you're asking for promotion to associate professor, then it's going to be judged by the faculty council based on those, how you put your packet together, those areas of excellence. The next question is, how does serving on a MS or a PhD committee measured in teaching in the teaching excellence bucket? And then the related question is, does it depend on whether you're a primary advisor or a member of the committee? Smita, you want to take that one?
I think this would be more of a service than teaching. Unless this PhD is your own candidate and you are the primary person responsible. But mostly it would fall under service.
Yeah. So, in regard to committee service on, graduate student or, advisory committees for, even med students doing research and things like our fellows, that's going to be looked at as, I think, it's a hybrid. It's almost a service, but also teaching. But then, as Smita pointed out, they're going to then look at, what was your role? Are you just a member of a committee, or were you the primary mentor? Is it possible to go up for both P&T right after switching from non-tenure earning to tenure earning? And I think, again, it's going to depend on whether you get promoted or not in your switch to tenure earning. If you don't get promoted, then I guess technically, and Scott, Austin, feel free to correct me on that if you've met the time at rank requirement.
The parameters that we typically put on this is, what we would encourage is, if you know that you are in the process of requesting a change in tenure status to tenure earning, we would say go ahead and make sure that's done prior to the promotion and put a promotion packet through based on two areas of excellence. If it's a case where you got promoted this year, but then 6 months later you're considering a change in tenure track, I would say that you probably would delay at least a year. And so it kind of puts you up against the clock. I'd mentioned the longer you wait, the harder it is to get that approved. It wouldn't look great to get promoted and then immediately change tenure status.
Because then that would be perceived as potentially gaming the system. Okay, so the next question is it's a question, but also I think a bit of a statement. So it says 100% full-time clinical faculty seem to have a hard time in promotion. What do you recommend to stand out, given that we don't do research and do more training and a little teaching? And I think I'll give my 2 cents in with that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Smita. I think that's a perception, but I think I guess it depends on what level you're talking at. So we actually have looked at this in the faculty council in terms of success rate of research versus clinical faculty. And research actually are more likely to be disapproved by the council if it is areas of excellence. But regardless, I think the stumbling block for clinical faculty, from my years of experience, and Alex can chime in here too, it has to do with national level of recognition. And they could go up in service if they're non-tenure earning. If they're tenure earning, yes, then typically we'll see service and teaching, and we're looking for some sort of curriculum development. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Smita.
And so I agree completely with Scott. 100% full-time clinical faculty. Usually they would do absolutely fine with training, bedside training, as well as other forms of training of junior members in the clinical team to claim excellence in service. And with that would come a need, though, of showing national recognition. So that's something that they should focus on. And I don't think any particular area is hard. Even those who are going only on research have to really show excellence in research.
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes can be as hard or harder. So I wouldn't beat myself up on that. If you're doing clinical service, be proud of it and claim it, and you can go up on service.
Yeah, and if your tenure earnings, the question is what do I do about teaching?
Yeah.
I think part of it too is the perception of what teaching means. So let's say you've developed a new line of service or you've developed a new method, right? Well, if you're being invited at other places and you're educating fellows, or residents at other institutions, or even here, in terms of what you're doing clinically, that can be actually presented as teaching as well. So one thing that I think, hopefully it's going to be more commonly known, but you can actually use your activities that you would normally fall under service. If they involve a teaching component, you can actually also use that as teaching. So a lot of that is, I would suggest what you can do. You could either, I'm happy to talk to you about it, or Samantha or Alex or other members on the faculty council to look at what you've got. And, with all our experience, we usually can see, what you may not have thought was teaching actually can be presented as teaching. So that's how I would suggest we could help you in that regard. So the next question is, could you give us some examples of excellence in service? And my answer to that is we will next Tuesday in that regard. So stay tuned.
Serving as chair or vice chair of faculty council.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Excellent.
and actually, yes, that aside, after you guys get promoted, and this is one of the more gratifying services that I've done in my career at UAB. But then it looks like appears to maybe be the final question is how much impact on earning advanced degrees, master's, PhD, during the service for P&T for tenure earning faculty. I'll be also a little confused about the question because typically I'm assuming additional degrees beyond your terminal degree is what that is. Quite frankly, that's not something that I think we've ever really discussed. I think as a reviewer, I would not really put a whole lot of weight in that unless you could convince me that in the process of doing that work, it's showing excellence in one of your chosen areas. Or so simply getting the degree, that's great, but you're going to have to convince me as a reviewer that somehow, showing that you have excellence for the institution. Alex, do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I would. To me, when I look at a packet, the assumption is that there's a terminal degree, and accruing additional degrees or additional training, to me, it's above and beyond the question at hand for promotion and tenure.
Yeah, I think you'd have to show that it's somehow part of the mission of what you've been doing, and it's actually providing additional evidence of excellence is what I would say. Do you have any opinion on that, Samantha?
No, I absolutely agree with you. You'll have to weave it into your particular area of excellence to see how that enhances that area.
Yeah.
I think it's more how you use it within the three areas.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, we're actually only 3 minutes over our scheduled time, which is good. So again, if you think of anything, first, I encourage you to attend next week's session. It's got a more faculty that you haven't seen here are going to be presented. We other faculty council members, so they're going to be focusing on the areas of excellence, giving examples of what they are, pitfalls that sometimes packets fall into, and if you can't, it's going to be posted, and so you can access it then. But feel free to contact us if you don't get any answers you're looking for in those sessions.